Hi, my name is Justin Shantie, mechanic for Matt Moss on the JDR JStar KTM team. This is the Transworld Motocross How-To presented by Lucas Oil. Today I'm going to show you how to change a front tire. What you want to do is you want to start by loosening the stem nut and cap. And take a valve core remover and remove the valve core from your tube. Set it aside. Then you want to get a wrench and loosen the block nut. And then sometimes on some tires it's hard to get the bead down, so I like to take a tire spoon and start at the rim lock and just work it way down. You can use it upside down so the curve is up. And just work it all the way around. Make sure that side's all the way down. Then flip it over and start on the other side. Once you have the bead all the way down, then you can start pulling one side of the tire over the rim. I like to use 3 spoons. I think it's a little bit easier because it always allows the middle one to be loose. So I always like to start on one side of the rim lock or the other. So I'll start by making sure that this is down. Pull this side over. I'll start with your second one. And then I like to pull this one back a little bit so I can get this one in there a little bit easier. And then just start working your way around. It'll get pretty loose after a couple. Just work that all the way around. And what I like to do next is I leave my tube in the tire just so it's not getting all bound up and having to put your fingers in there and have to pull it all the way out. So I just flip it over, start the rim lock again. And you can kind of use the rotor to hold your spoons so that way they don't come back and hit you. And then you can do the same thing, work it all the way around. Okay, now the bead should be broke loose on both sides of the rim, and you can start to pull it off. Make sure you watch your valve stem. Make sure it comes out of the hole. You don't want to break that off, and then it'll come off just like that. You can put that down. I like to check to make sure that none of the nipples are poking through under your rim tape. So you can just visually check that. Go all the way around. All right. And then when installing a new tire, sometimes they're directional, so you'll look for the arrow on the tire. This one, let's see here, goes like that. All right, I like to use some baby powder just to put inside the tube, inside the tire, to help the tube from slipping. You just sprinkle a little bit in the bottom there, and just kind of spin your tire around. It's kind of messy, but it helps the tube from slipping inside the tire. Then if you're going to reuse your tube, which as long as it isn't pinched or it wasn't flat when you started, there shouldn't be any reason why you can't reuse it. Just pull that out. Just set your old tire aside. You're done with it now. Then before I start, I like to put my valve core back inside the stem and beat it up with just a little bit of air. I like to put my tube inside the tire first. I think it's easier than having to put the tire on halfway and then having to work the stem under. So get that in there like that. If you have some some Windex or any kind of like Simple Green or something like that, anything that's not like silicone based, I just spray it on like the bead of the tire here on the back side, and I run it around there just a little bit. Makes the tire easier to beat up. So, then go get your the jam nut that you took off from the tire and pull the tire back just a little bit, and you can pull your tube out just to where the stem's sticking out, and you're going to put that through the stem hole in the rim. And you can tighten that down finger tight all the way where it's straight. That way when you put the tire on the bead, the stem doesn't move either way because you don't want it bending either way. You'll get a flat. And then while you're there, if the rim lock is It's usually like right near the stem, so you can push it through and get it underneath the bead here, and it seems to go on a lot easier. Then you can kind of just like work this down. The Windex really helps. So once you get that on a little ways, I only use 1 spoon. A lot of people use 2. I don't think it really matters. It's just if you have another one, I guess maybe. I just work it all the way around. All you're doing is working the back side of the bead onto the rim. There, all right. Now we've got one side of the bead on. We're gonna start with the top side. And I like to spray a little Windex on the top side too. Just a little bit to help the rubber go over the metal of the rim. Work it around there a little bit. All right. I also, at any bike shop, it seems like you can buy these bead buddies from Motion Pro. I like to use one. It's almost like a third hand, so that helps. I start by taking 2 spoons on either side of the rim lock, leaving a little space to get to the top spoke near the rim lock. And then how these work, it just goes under the rim and over the spoke. It keeps the bead down right there, so when you're working it around, it doesn't pull the bead up behind you and you're not chasing it. So after that, I just use 1 spoon. I kind of just use my hand along the way. So I just start on this side of the rim lock, or this side of the spoon here, and work it like this. Little bites at first is key. You don't want to take too big of bites because then the middle of the bead doesn't want to go down. So I don't know, every top spoke is where I usually go. Work it around like this. If it seems to get hard towards the end, that means that usually the bead is already set over here. You just want to push it down a little bit. And sometimes the bottom sticks too. And if necessary, just flip it over and do the same thing with your palm. Make sure that's all good. And that should relieve some pressure here. You want the bead, before you put air in it, to go in the middle of the rim. Sometimes these hard pack tires, they get a little tricky on the bead there. And then just continue to work it all the way around. Once you're to like your last bite or so with your spoon, you want to make sure you push in your rim lock because you want it down when you put the bead underneath it. So just make sure it's nice and loose and pushed all the way in when you get there. So I've got about 1 more bite left, and usually if it's about, you know, inch or so away, you can use your palm. Just make sure you push that in and it slides right under there. Now that it's all the way on the rim, you can pull your bead buddy out, and now you can air up your tire. This is when the Windex comes into play. It'll help it bead up a lot faster. You don't want the rubber to stick and not bead up. So just use a regular, any kind of air chuck from a hardware store or auto parts store. What you want to look for is there's usually a bead line, and it'll pop also on both sides. And that seems like it beaded up pretty quick. And you just want to check the bead line here. Make sure it's all the way seated all the way around. Just flip your tire over and check the other side too. Seem to be good. At this point now you can tighten your rim lock. I use a ratcheting wrench. It seems to go a little bit faster. Tighten it, you know, get it snug, and then you can start working it down. It doesn't have to be super, super tight, but you want it definitely snug down to the rim. And then now you can either remove the jam nut. I like to leave mine on there for the next tire change, that way I don't lose it. Now you can check your tire pressure after the rim lock is tight. I'm just gonna get my tire pressure gauge. Any motorcycle tire pressure gauge usually goes to about 30 pounds. So you're only gonna use a motorcycle tire from like 11 to sometimes maybe all the way to 14. So any little gauge like that'll work. I like to set my tires like 11.5 in the front is usually pretty good for Supercross. Outdoors, you might want to bump it up a little bit just as track conditions are a little bit rougher. So I'm gonna set this one to 11.5. All right, all set there. Another little trick I like to use just to make sure that your valve core is properly placed in there. I just take a little bit of saliva there and put it on the top of your valve stem. And if it bubbles up, you have a leak inside there. So you're either going to want to replace the valve core, or maybe it's not tight enough or there's something stuck in it. So you might want to pull that out. Check that. We seem to be fine here. I'm going to replace my cap. And if you decided to leave the jam nut on there, you just kind of snug it up against the cap. And there you have it. Front tire installed. Thank you for watching the Transworld Motocross How-To presented by Lucas Oil.